Hello, welcome to our presentation on From Waste to ROI, Maximizing Cloud Resources with FinOps. I'm Hyun Park from Amalgam Insights, and I'm joined here today by Sean Harris.
Hello, everybody.
And so we're going to talk today about cloud costs, cloud FinOps, the challenges of managing the cloud. Obviously, this is a big challenge because the number of resources, the number of products, the number of platforms, the types of usage involved, the types of costs that are provided, the types of contracts, all these things that make it extremely expensive and challenging, as not to mention the technical and operational challenges that exist as well. Sean, you know this as well as anyone. We have been living this challenge, and you do this on a day-to-day basis, whereas I watch it as an analyst. So just to give you an idea of who we are, just a quick, just so you know that we didn't just get dragged off from the street. Here I am. My name's Hyun Park. I'm the chief analyst at Amalgam Insights. We're an industry analyst firm. I started about 6 years ago to focus on technology costs and analytics, the challenges of really figuring out what is happening in IT. We have two key trends that we really look at here. The first is that technology evolution tends to outpace operational and financial management of tech. So everything's got to catch up afterwards after we figure out the really cool thing that just got implemented into the enterprise that everybody started using. And the second one is what we call the IT rule of 30. The idea that ungoverned technologies lead to 30% of tech spend being wasted. And there's a lot of variability here. If you've got a really clean environment, you might have 10% waste there. If you really haven't been paying attention and you are in growth mode for a couple of years, you might have 50, 60, 70% out there. So there's a lot of variance there, but on average, the number tends to be about 30%. And that goes across tech spend. So we're going to look at that today and what that means from a cloud perspective. And let me pass it over to Sean to tell you a little, so he can tell you a bit.
My name is Sean Harris. I've been a IT practitioner for the last 20 years. I've worked in every industry from small business and startups to government contracting to higher education to healthcare. I'm currently the developer relations lead at Spot by NetApp, and I've been here, I've been here for about 9 months. My background comes from infrastructure as code, container automation. I've dabbled in digital forensics and incident response, as well as cloud governance and FinOps. I hold 2 degrees, one in political science, the other in information systems with an emphasis in data security, both from the University of Utah, go Utes. I hold certifications from AWS, the FinOps Foundation, and in my spare time, I found some time to pick up some PADI certifications, and I'm a certified scuba diver. As for the key trends that I really look at is, number one, security must be part of the FinOps and governance lifecycle. If it's not, you're doing it wrong. And then all optimizations lead back. All optimization efforts in the cloud lead back to sound FinOps governance. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through the presentation.
I imagine that scuba certification must be really useful because in IT, you're always underwater.
That's exactly why I got it. I'm either 130 feet underwater or 150 feet underwater in technical debt.
Yes, so true. You know, when it's Sunday, 3 a.m. and something's broken, yep, there you go. So our goals today for y'all in the audience, we're going to look at several different areas. The importance of setting up cross-departmental cloud governance, the most effective ways to find wasted resources and to rationalize expenses, what it means for a developer to be a good business steward of cloud environments. And Sean's going to have a lot here, I'm sure, because the developer role has become much more of a strategic and business role over the past few years. Gone are the days when the top developers or the best developers are only coders. You've got to be a business person now to really understand and be a top tier developer. And then tips for task management that allow your team to refocus on strategic objectives. It can be very easy to get in the weeds in cloud. And as tech people, and once upon a time I was an IT person, it's very easy to get into the details and to feel like a champion for getting into the details and fixing specific details when when your bigger ecosystem is in trouble. And so how do you avoid those getting stuck in the weeds and make sure you're taking care of everything? We're going to get there. And as we're talking, please send over your questions, put them in the chat. We will get to them. We will save plenty of time for you to provide your questions and for us to answer basically what you're looking for and whatever pops up in your head. So as a starting point, when I think about FinOps, I just want to point out, this is a framework that we use here at Amalgam Insights to talk about value creation opportunities on the outside, and then cost capabilities on the inside. And the goal here is to talk about how a lot of different capabilities run into each other when you're managing technology costs. You have to start kind of at the top with inventory and baseline, start moving your way around clockwise and going to governance, end user support. Then you start managing the costs, optimizing, getting into contract compliance, and then you go around and you do the tougher environmental optimization. And I'm just curious, Sean, how this fits into how you look at FinOps and how you've been looking at cloud management.
I think it's really spot on. I think that we forget about this value chain, or this chain that we have on this graphic, where there are so many things that go into how we source, how we deploy, how we keep this cycle running. And I think that optimization is a big part of it, but good governance from the beginning of the acquisition process is something that we forget that you still have to do as the cloud computing environment grows, right? 60% of companies moved in some way or other to the cloud during the pandemic. And so now we are left with a bunch of resources that we either haven't optimized because we had to move so fast, we had to adjust on the fly and forgot about. And so optimization really has to be a key point of any holistic FinOps cycle. And it starts as low level as what machines have I left on for too long, or what volumes have I created that I totally forgot about and are just sitting there costing me money. Optimization is a continuous process, just like we show on the graph here. And I think that as we get more into the FinOps lifecycle and using those FinOps practices, and we just the same way that we've started up cloud centers of excellence in companies, we're going to see FinOps centers of excellence where it's all about managing the spend and managing those third-party providers. And so I think that having a lifecycle graph of this makes a lot of sense, but I also think that it reminds us to take into account certain things that we forget, or that we didn't even think, that we weren't aware of. I think this is a good chart for as well.
Yeah, when I started my IT career, it was all about monolithic apps that are customized to the enterprise. And nowadays we do a great job of being able to get to containerization, virtual machines, services, very specific augments that happen that you can add to your code that can that can be duplicated really easily. And now, we got really good at that over the past 2 or 3 years, and now now the bill has showed up.
and when we started our careers in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think that the way that we acquired machines that ran the applications was so vastly different and took so much longer. Now it takes me 30 seconds to go spin up a virtual server with all the stuff that I need. It's not a 6-month procurement time, a 6-week deployment time, a 3 weeks of having an enterprise application consultant on site deploying my software. It's all up to me and my fingers and how I'm deploying that and my deployment strategies. And so when you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that we have to be more strategic as practitioners, I think that that's really what it means. Is there's so much that's entrusted to us that part of this lifecycle management has to include the strategic thinking and the strategic capabilities in ways we haven't asked the IT departments and the IT practitioners to be a part of in day-to-day company operations.
Yeah, they've got now you've got to go beyond just turning something on. Exactly. And it's not just about the processes, but about the people too. There's an entire team associated with FinOps, and that can be a challenge as well, working cross-departmentally, especially as a developer. I know in my technical career, I found it took a couple of years to figure out how to work beyond IT. It was a real challenge, to be quite honest, because first of all, they have no idea what you're talking about.
It's true. It's true. I mean, he has always been a black box of the operations of the company. You just kind of set it and forget. I've always used the analogy of the dentist, and nobody wants to go to the dentist. Nobody wants to know what the dentist does. Nobody wants to think about the dentist until you actually need the dentist. And that's what IT has traditionally been in these organizations. And now, as product and IT's lines begin to get more blurred, it's something that we have to think about from that strategic point of view.
Right. And honestly, traditionally, it's been hard enough just for application developers to talk to the rest of IT, network storage, project management. But with FinOps, you've also got to be able to talk to, especially the financial side of the business, the finance team, the accounting team, and the procurement team that works with contracts. And honestly, those are three different groups. Finance thinks about kind of financial strategy, accounting thinks about kind of payments and kind of the day-to-day transactions. Procurement is dealing with those vendor relationships, and all of them want some set of information that is related to FinOps, and almost none of them speak IT.
It's true.
Yep. So we're going to dig into that just a bit more over the next few minutes. So, what are the types of cost governance opportunities that exist? At a tactical level, when we look at the cloud, these are a few areas that come to mind. I would not say this is comprehensive by any means, but I would say that this kind of goes from left to right, kind of like the tactical aspects all the way to the big strategic opportunities. Sean, I've seen people start all over the place when they're looking at cost governance, but what do you think makes the most sense as a starting point, or really doing this well?
I think the starting point has to begin with, what do we have now? Right. And when I say what do we have now, I mean, look at your service providers. The way that we acquire, like I mentioned earlier, the way that we acquire IT services and products has changed. It used to be a long sales cycle. It used to be a long stuff. Now it's your IT guy has a credit card, wants to try a new tool. He goes and plugs his credit card in. He's got a free 30-day demo, and you forget about it. So when we look at this first button and the plan and usage changes, how do we account for that? And we have to look at what services are we paying for that aren't providing that value. You mentioned at the beginning that 30% of all IT resources go to spend, but 30% of all IT budgets are allocated for cloud resources. So if we're wasting 30% of our budgets, that's a big chunk of money. It doesn't matter if your budget's $100,000 because you're a small, medium business. It doesn't matter if it's $1 million a month because you're a large enterprise. 30% of 30% is still a pretty big number. And so we have to take that into account. So you can't get started with cost governance until you know what you have and what you're paying for. And that includes the sprawl accounts that somebody set up randomly and that are tied to your corporate spend. That is ensuring that guardrails are in place when you set up a new cloud provider. It doesn't matter which one, all of them have guardrails that you can build in for sub accounts and child accounts so that you can go through. And a multi-account strategy is really the only way to make cloud governance work at scale. And when I say a multi-account strategy, I don't mean every person gets their own account. Some companies it does. It just means dividing up your resources so that you can charge back effectively. That previous slide that you had that showed how many departments are involved in FinOps, right, shows finance, accounting, procurement, tax, legal, security. All of these things have to be taken into account when you put together a multi-account strategy. And so if you don't know what you have, that's probably where you should start, is identifying what you have, where you have it, and who's paying for it.
Yeah, that inventory, that's single sort of source of truth, that golden record, it's hard to do with between all the different developers, all the different projects, all the different locations, all the remote work that is happening, the ease of being able to expense something rather than go directly through sourcing, because frankly, who wants to go through corporate sourcing?
Right.
Nobody. All of that obviously makes it easy to spin up accounts, but it makes it a lot harder to manage the costs at the end of the day if you don't have some sort of master billing account that you can at least roll things up to. I think it makes sense to give some flexibility and have child accounts and move at the speed of business. But at the end of the day, you have to at least provide some sort of central visibility and have that centralized and golden inventory to be able to get back to. I think it's easy to race into just saying, I'm going to optimize this service because it's the fat rabbit, as we say in MBA world. It's the thing that sticks out as the a big opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't look at everything else, it's easy to really miss some really obvious opportunities.
And you mentioned the single source of truth. I mean, the question that I would have for the people that are out there listening to this is, who do you go to when you have a problem with a cloud service provider? Do you go to your DevOps guy? Do you go to your product guy? Who's your single point of contact? Who's your single source of truth, your golden record, if you will? Who do you go to when you have a question about what you're spending in AWS? If you don't know, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, obviously we have just touched on what is possible with savings plans and expenses and cost management and multi-cloud. But for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to our next topic, which is that in addition to cost governance, there are a lot of other things that are, I would say, parallel to FinOps that have to be part of the discussion as for us to be responsible. So beyond costs, great stewards think about performance, scale, security, geography, industry, all these things that are related to the business. And at the bottom, we even have environmental and social impact, ESG, thinking as we're starting to think about how the environment and sustainability issues are related to the trade-offs that we're making from a computing perspective. So,
and I just want to really quick touch on ESG and the importance. In the last year, I have seen more companies say, hey, how can we track our environmental impact in our cloud environment better? And I know that the cloud providers have all the big three have talked about how can we show the environmental impact? How can we report that back? Because that's an important part of business in this post-COVID world, is not only how are we delivering value to our customers, but how are we ensuring that our environmental impact is on par with our stated goals? And you're going to see more and more come up from the providers, from companies who integrate with these providers. And so it's an important thing that I think that we don't talk about enough, but really needs to be discussed as being good stewards.
Yeah, and honestly, it's going to be hard to figure out the full economic and environmental impact without looking granularly at the biggest spend categories that we have, and cloud is going to be one of those. Unfortunately, cloud reporting is relatively good at a usage level for being able to translate back into some sort of impact. We're going to be able to get there. It's not like trying to figure out, say, some 10,000 piece factory machine thing that could have been sourced from 1,000 different locations, and you're never going to quite figure out what that actual impact of that machine is. The cloud provider at least provides that starting point for data, but this might be an opportunity going forward. We're talking future facing now, that your dev might end up being responsible for ESG reporting to a greater extent, because computing is such an important piece of that puzzle.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. But also digging into a couple of these other areas, it's important to not just get caught up in the cost management, pure cost management, and trying to cut down to the bone, because that can be tempting as well. It's easy to try to live on the edge and say, I'm going to optimize this thing to within an inch of its life, because we like doing that, frankly, on the technology side as well, making sure we have a lean, mean fighting machine that is down to, it gives you 5 nines of uptime, making sure we are getting down to the narrowest possible margin of error and that can be tempting, but that doesn't always make sense from a business perspective.
For sure. There is such a thing as too much optimization. Over optimizing can become very problematic if you don't have the right tools and know what you're looking at, the data that you're looking at.
Yeah, and I think especially from a security and governance perspective, there's a certain amount that you want to keep in reserve, whether it's for BCDR or whether you're trying to maintain some upside for application growth, workload usage that you may not be expecting, all sorts of reasons that's going to matter. And security is getting more difficult as well. Frankly, better than I, Sean, how much power and computing, how that security is taking up, possibly more than the application itself. If you're trying to do things right.
Yeah, protecting your workloads is important, and as more government organizations and regulatory bodies are either tasked with enforcing data privacy and security, or new laws are passed. You mentioned one of the bullet points that we have up here is governmental compliance, and we're seeing more and more changes at the state level. The state of Utah, the state of California especially, have been really on the forefront of putting in strict privacy and reporting guidelines that companies will need to pivot to, and take that into being good stewards of the data that we are. And I think that we forget that we're entrusted with the data that our subscribers and our users entrust to us, right? Mm-hmm. Once they've uploaded it, they lose all control of that data, and it's on us as practitioners to ensure the compliance and the security of that and confidentiality of that data, as well as the availability. And I think being a good cloud steward goes beyond how can I optimize my spend, but how can I optimize my environment to make it the most secure, the most highly available, and the most reliable service that I possibly can with my product stack.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a reminder to everybody listening that we are taking questions. Feel free to add them to the chat, or if you're listening to this on a recording, think of your questions and frankly, send them over afterwards. We would be glad to answer them. And obviously, we have thoughts about all of these topics that we are bringing up. We are not going to stand here for 12 hours to do this, but we are glad to answer any questions you got. So next up, so bringing kind of these two pieces together, we've talked about cost governance, and then we've very lightly touched on other aspects. So, based on this, what does it really mean to be a good steward? We are trying to figure out this trade-off. We've had this evolution of DevOps and platform engineering that has occurred over the past few years that have made applications both easier and more powerful to develop. But at the same time, it's going to be super challenging to figure out how to do that right, especially as cloud computing and cloud platforms also become more complex. And then how do we provide that visibility across the business to everybody who's involved? So, how do devs figure out how to do this?
They don't.
Today? Yeah,
they don't really. And I think that DevOps and platform engineering, we need to start separating the two. DevOps needs to be the methodology that we use for continuous communication and continuous optimization, and the standard things. The CI/CD pipeline is a DevOps thing. DevOps is the methodology. Platform engineering and SREs are the ones who take that methodology and put it into practice. And developers call what they're going to call when they instantiate new infrastructure, when they stand new stuff up. They're going to ask for the biggest, most most resource loaded instances and compute capacity that they possibly can, because that's what their application needs. Having tooling available that goes in and says, no, you only need 1/10 of what you've requested, and so that's what I'm going to give you, is where good stewardship becomes into practice. Knowing what your application actually needs versus what's being requested is where that starts at being a good steward. Making sure that we're using our financial resources correctly, making sure that we're optimized at launch is a big part of this, because still need to be able to run at the speed of business. You don't want to put it on the slowest infrastructure that you possibly can, because that's not cost effective. If you're constantly having to scale up and scale back, that's not cost effective either. Finding that sweet spot where you're always running and you need to scale up when load hits and you scale back down, and you can smooth out some of those resource curves, that's really where good stewardship comes into place. When you can run your business at the speed of your business with the resources that you need and adjust on the fly, that's when good stewardship takes over.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like it's gotten more challenging over the past decade. Just because, frankly, we all write sloppy code now. Optimized code stopped being important about a decade ago when resources became infinite, as far as we could all tell, and now it's starting to actually matter again. Now that we can see the cost and at least get an idea of what can happen when a workload goes out of control.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the idea that code is self-healing now, right? The code, we're not writing traditional Objective-C or C++ that we would have to go in and fix by hand. We write modular, right? We've decoupled how we instantiate services. And so now it's a Python script, it's JSON that's just responding to what the response from the server is and calling different libraries and methods based on what it's getting back from the server to tell it what the server says. I need this. Okay, I'll give you that. And so I think that we've made our code self-healing to the point where we take a lot of the humanity out of the infrastructure and out of the way that we provision compute resources and our applications, frankly.
Yes, and I think that opportunity for tuning and looking for recursive, unnecessarily recursive or overly recursive services, being able to actually figure out what the heck is going on with the services that we're providing, rather than simply providing something that's functional is important, because it is so easy. It is too easy now to take a gigantic workload, duplicate it an infinite number of times, and then see the results just because you wanted 5 or 10 test environments and then you forgot about them afterwards.
Yep, that's 100%, because I can tell you from a practitioner standpoint, I can't tell you how many servers I've forgotten about, and 3 months later I come back and what was I doing with that? What was I logged in for? And in with Windows, especially, if you stay logged in, you've increased your security threat vector exponentially by just leaving the server connected to an RDP session and forgetting about it. And so I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an alert that's like, you've left this on for 3 days. Well, what was I doing? And I got pulled off of that. I was working on it for 3 days. Being able to instantiate that code and deploy in real time and shut down in real time after 2 hours of not being used and then shut down really goes back to being the good steward of not only the data, but the infrastructure that we're tasked with managing.
Yeah, and of course, with FinOps, if you've set up your environment correctly, this is an opportunity to get anomalous alerts, and simply there's no reason for you to have to actually remember every single possible thing that you kept on that might be providing costs. We have capabilities to track that at this point.
And that's really, that's what Spot by NetApp does. Right. At the end of the day, our tool set helps you become a better steward of your cloud environment and have better visualization and insights into what your cloud spend and what your environment is, from your basic cloud spend to your virtual machine infrastructure to your containers. And that's why we're putting this presentation, is so that you can learn the topics and the trends behind it, but you can also see what tooling's out there, because the tools that you invest in to support your cloud infrastructure are just as important as choosing where your cloud infrastructure is going to sit.
Yes, and when we at Amalgam Insights looked at the cloud cost management space mid last year, and we continue to do so to this day, there's a wide range of tools out there. when you do your due diligence for something like this, you will find everything from basically not much more than a spreadsheet that looks at your accounts. You'll find specific solutions that just look at, say, Kubernetes management, or specific solutions that just look at usage optimization of some sort. And it's important to match the solution that you're trying to source to whatever your actual challenge is, because this is definitely not an apples to apples comparison here. This is a very fragmented market. We track over 60 solutions in this space, and they are frankly all over the place. So just a note out there from a practical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, before, at the beginning of this presentation, you mentioned how security, of course, is an important topic for you. And I'm curious about this topic of how security impacts FinOps. So, of course, we understand a dollar is a dollar, but where does security fall into that mix?
That's a great question. And I think, like I mentioned at the beginning, security has to be considered as a part of a holistic FinOps strategy. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is because at the end of the day, you're going to be spending money on security tools. You can spend $100,000 to buy a security tool that's going to run in your cloud and optimize your workloads. And yes, that's a big number. But the law of big numbers says if something goes wrong, it's going to cost me 10x or 20x more. So would you rather spend $100,000 on a security tool, which is a big chunk of change to spend from an OpEx standpoint instead of a CapEx, right? Because the way that purchasing IT infrastructure and services has changed from CapEx to OpEx? Or would you rather spend $1 million dealing with the result of a data breach? Somebody left an S3 bucket open and 2 million records of your customers' data got leaked to the press, and you didn't want that. Somebody forgot to apply a patch to your backend infrastructure, to a core of your backend infrastructure, right? FinOps is all about financial operations that you have in the cloud. And as more companies move to the cloud, you need to take that risk assessment and say, I'm either going to pay the $1 or $2 million to deal with a breach, or I'm going to pay $100,000 to be proactive about it. From a compliance standpoint, it's just as vital. Compliance we rely on our cloud service providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, Oracle Cloud, right? Mm-hmm. We can name them all off our head, but we rely on them as these companies have either been born in the cloud or forced to move to the cloud, that their SOC 2, their ISO, their all of these different trade compliance programs that you're a member of and that you have to be a member of for your customers to be happy with your service and be able to sign on that dotted line. You rely on your cloud service provider to take security just as seriously as you have to take security, because the cloud is a shared services approach. Your cloud provider doesn't manage the security on your individual workloads. The antivirus, the firewall, all that aspect goes to you. They control the physical security and the plant security that goes into the infrastructure. They control some of the backend security, but at the end of the day, securing your workloads is your job. And you rely on the infrastructure and support of your cloud service provider to obtain those certifications. It's up to you to keep those policies into place to manage those certifications and continue to grow them out in a way that makes sense for your business. And that's why I say security and compliance both impact FinOps, because at the end of the day, you're spending money to be a member of these programs. You're spending money to secure your workloads. And if you don't, you're doing the cloud wrong. And second, if you don't, or you forget and you lose that status, you lose business, which impacts your bottom line at the end of the day. So just as FinOps includes everything in the cloud, security and compliance have to be part of that holistic approach.
Yeah, and I think of this from a numbers perspective. So flipping the number you just brought up about 100,000 versus a million, that kind of says to me, I'm willing to spend, say, 10% of the breach cost to avoid it happening. So from a kind of actuarial perspective, I would say, that means I think there's a 10% chance of this happening. And I think increasingly there are more things that have a 3%, 5%, 10% chance of happening that justify the cost of security, but that doesn't necessarily get explained to the CFO. And frankly, when you're talking to the finance office, it's very important to just talk about this in numbers and not just in the portfolio of security capabilities that are necessary across firewall, antivirus, et cetera. Right now, obviously, ransomware is the big, ransomware and personally identifiable information associated with GDPR, CCPA, things like that are definitely the key issues that resonate with the CFO. But obviously, there are other concerns as well that also have a big dollar number associated with them around losing business capabilities associated with BCDR and the extreme volume of threats that now exist, not just from individual hackers, but even from state actors at this point. And that's what you're going up against at the end of the day. Even if you're a small or medium business, you are a target for a state actor potentially. And frankly, they might see you as a better target because they think it might be easier to squeeze $10 million away from you than it is to go after Morgan Stanley or whatever.
I look at the SolarWinds breach from a couple of years ago. The SolarWinds breach was a unique supply chain breach that we've talked about extensively, but let's really get into it. Why did Russian state hackers from a known state-sponsored group hack into an independent software provider based out of Austin, Texas? They broke in because they knew that they had government contracts. And not only did they have government contracts, companies that they worked with had government contracts. And so the threat vector was there. And so getting in and tainting one build pipeline with a false certificate that suddenly became trusted is how they got in. And it required them to spend millions of dollars to retool their security operations. DevOps and DevSecOps are implicitly intertwined in a way that we didn't think about when the DevOps methodology came out in the late 2010s. DevSecOps is the natural evolution of that, where we're saying everybody is part of the security chain. Everybody has something to do in regards to information security and availability. Availability doesn't just mean that I can get to what I need when I want it. It means that I'm getting the right information when I need it, at the right place, at the right time, with the right access controls. And that's why security takes such an important, and we harp on it. And I harp on it personally because I think that the more secure that these cloud companies, the customers that are born in the cloud, the customers who are moving to the cloud become, the better experience your end users will have and the better result that you will have on your bottom line if you take security at the forefront of your product offering.
Yeah, and it's not just about perhaps access and governance, but it has a performance aspect as well. Obviously, security that locks down performance to the point that something isn't operational doesn't work. And so it's easy to lock something down completely. It's easy to get performance, tune performance up perfectly, but this is a balanced act that we're trying to get into.
Right. And just like we said at the beginning, over optimization can be disastrous for an organization. Over security, overextending your security, underextending your security can be just as impactful to your organization's business operations and restricting.
Yeah. So, coming back to direct FinOps, thinking about how do you rationalize your cloud environment? So we went about this. We talked about this. Starting with inventory before, but once you get there and once you figure out what you've got in your environment, how do you rationalize it? What would you recommend?
Well, I think it depends on your business, right? In March of 2020, we were all suddenly tasked with working in the office one day, and within a week, we were being asked to move to the cloud. Companies like Zoom, companies that focus in the cloud and collaboration, suddenly had to scale out in ways that they didn't ever plan on being a reality. And we had to do the same thing. And so I think rationalizing your cloud environment is stepping back and saying, what do we have running in the cloud? What do we need running in the cloud? And what is our go forward plan from here? As we return to the offices, what is our plan for our workloads? What is our plan for our what is the plan for continuing our day-to-day operations? What is the plan for increasing our product, enhancing our product, not increasing our product, enhancing our product? Those all have to go into your strategic plan, and those take a lot of planning, from your forecasting of revenue to your roadmap for your products to what are we going to do with the infrastructure that it takes to run it. How do you rationalize it? You have to take it as a case-by-case approach to what works for your business. And I know that's really generic, and you're like, why did I sign up for this webinar if you're going to tell me it's a case-by-case thing? There are tools that will make it so that you can get that holistic view so that you know what you have running. There is no way, and I've sat through it, I've had to go through AWS bills line by line, and Azure bills and GCP bills line by line, service by service, and identify every server that's running and what it's running for. You have to have automated tools to keep up with the speed of the cloud. And what I mean by that is the cloud changes so rapidly, the cloud changes so frequently that you cannot possibly keep up with all the changes and what is going on at your cloud service provider. So you need automated tools that give you that insight into what you're running and how you're running it, as well as the performance stats. That's how you rationalize your cloud environment, because then because your CFO, your CTO, your CISO want actionable data that they can go, they don't care how many servers you're running. If you're spending $1,000 a month, they're going to say, knock it down by 10% so that we can keep in with our financial goals. It's our job to rationalize why that would be a bad idea, either good or bad, right? Why we can either go one way or go the other. That is up to us as practitioners to be the reason that we can rationalize that cloud environment. Financial commitments that you make to your cloud providers is another way to do it, right? Going in and entering into a long-term agreement. The longer term agreements that you go into with your cloud service providers, the cheaper it gets. That's how the cloud works. That's how business works. And so running at scale requires purchasing at scale. And the longer that you can go in and make that use case, the more that it will benefit you and help you rationalize what your cloud spend is and why you're spending it. The other thing to think of is excess capacity, not your excess capacity, but excess capacity of others that you can get at a discount, and being able to go in and allocate resources that somebody may have bought that doesn't need it right then. And so you've got a big workload that needs to scale out. Can you do that without having to go on demand and paying the most expensive rate for the cloud service provider? Can you use the excess capacity marketplaces from the cloud providers to go in and buy somebody else's instances for half a day or 2 days or however long you need that workload to run? And that's a way to knock 90% off your on-demand cloud spend right there. And so rationalizing also means justifying in this, because at the end of the day, we as practitioners are being asked to justify what we have, why we have it, and where we're using it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the piece that gets ignored most often is planning for peak unplanned usage.
Yep.
It's fairly easy to look at your environment and say, here are duplicate environments or duplicate services or things that aren't being used but have a minimum charge that can be cut off. But it's easy to stop there and say, hey, I did my job and I optimized everything. Whereas that's really just a starting point, because there's so many opportunities to change the status of your process, going from, say, analytic data to archived data, or to think about what happens if you are going towards, say, Christmas time, when your retail workloads are going to go shoot through the roof, whatever it may be. There's opportunities to plan with what your IT environment should look like going forward, that are honestly the real opportunities to cut costs and are necessary to get to that IT rule of 30. Frankly, if you just cut your duplicate computing resources that you built out over the past couple of years and you get to 30%, you should not think, oh, I followed the IT rule of 30 and I'm done. Really, that just means you've just started, and you might have, unfortunately, a lot more opportunity to save money in your cloud computing environment.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
so
100% spot on.
Yep. So next slide, just asking which cloud objectives and usage patterns are strategic to your business. And I'm curious whether anything has shown up to you around multi-cloud or hybrid cloud usage, or shifts in how much the cloud is being used from an operational perspective. Frankly, it's not, cloud computing is a core IT capability at this point. I don't think that, moving to the cloud is the controversy that it was 5-10 years ago, but but we're reaching a more nuanced type of argument at this point of
For
how
sure.
cloud is being used. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing two things. The first thing that I'm seeing is what you mentioned, the how are we using it and are we getting the best value for the money that we're spending in the cloud? Cloud is growing. Cloud is 5-10 years ago, it was no, I'm never moving to the cloud. I'm going to keep my data center. COVID changed that. Let's be real. COVID changed that. But at the same time, now companies are looking and saying, hey, did we overcommit to the cloud? Do we need to go back to the hybrid model? What have we done with the space that was our data center? Have we sold it? Right? Just the same problem seeing with commercial real estate as we return to office happens in data centers. Get rid of all of those space. We shifted everything into our cloud service provider. The other thing I see is that cloud service providers are seeing this trend and becoming more responsive to the economic headwinds that we've seen last half of 2022 and this first half of 2023, which means they have an incentive to make it more affordable for you to stay in the cloud. They have an incentive to keep you hooked. Moving from one hosting platform to another at a service level is exponentially harder the longer that you're in there. And so the cloud providers have a two-prong interest. One, keep you in their cloud as long as possible so that you're tied to all their services, so it's hard to move to some other cloud provider. And two, make it affordable so that your bottom line isn't coming back to, we're paying cloud provider A too much. Let's look at cloud provider B and a wholesale migration to that provider's cloud. At the end of the day, the cloud is just somebody else's computer, just like it was when we were renting colo space, and just like it was when we were paying for data centers because we didn't want to host them ourselves. We're just doing it at scale now. And so those cloud providers are getting more in tune to that, and making it more affordable, and at the same time tying their services up so that you are locked in, because the more vendor lock-in that you have, the harder it is for you to move. So those are the ones that I'm seeing. And then the other thing that I'm seeing is security. How do we make sure that we're running secure as possible? What tools do we need so that we can be proactive security wise? Nobody wants to be the next SolarWinds. Nobody wants to be the next Colonial Pipeline. Nobody wants to be the next Equifax. And I name drop those because everybody knows those breaches. Colonial Pipeline is critical infrastructure. Equifax, consumer reporting and banking. SolarWinds, network monitoring and day-to-day operations. Nobody wants to be the next company that ends up on the front page of dark reading or somebody else's security blog because you got hacked because somebody left something open. Look, the LastPass hack happened because an engineer had his Plex server open to the world. Somebody figured out that his Plex server was tied to a LastPass employee and got in and compromised the LastPass code. Nobody wants to be that guy. And so you're seeing security take more of a forefront, and companies are more willing to invest in security than their cloud spend. They don't realize that the two are intrinsically linked. And that's something that we have to think about as we look at these trends going 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, it's never great when your company name shows up on Swift on security.
Right.
And I think another trend that's showing up is increasingly the cloud providers are competing on price and some interconnectivity with each other. I think Oracle, Microsoft is kind of the example I think of most, where they have actually a pretty decent interconnect relationship, and Oracle is honestly going for cutting costs because they know they're number 4 and they can't get into the big 3 without taking some big bets. Right. At the same time, Google is becoming a bit more enterprise friendly. They all basically every non-Amazon cloud realizes they've got to get pretty aggressive if they ever want to be number 1. And they all want to be number 1 because, although Microsoft, Google, and then, the others, Oracle, IBM, aren't as big as Amazon. They're all huge companies in their own right. They're all mega billion-dollar companies that all want to think that they could
And they
Become.
all have a vested interest in growing out the business for their existing customers. People who use Oracle are dedicated to Oracle. People who use
Yes.
IBM and buy IBM hardware and services are dedicated to IBM. You don't want them in the Amazon. You don't want those customers fleeing for another cloud. Your
Right.
vested interest is making sure that your customers stay in your cloud. Amazon has a unique space because they're a vendor, but they're agnostic. We buy lots of different stuff from Amazon. You're
Mhm.
not buying one particular set of services until you go into the AWS cloud from Amazon, right? You're not buying anything else from Amazon at that point. You're not tied to them the way that you are with Microsoft's licensing or Oracle's licensing or IBM licensing. And so these companies see that and are trying to exploit not only, hey, you probably want to use a multi-cloud approach, but hey, you also probably don't want to keep all your eggs in Amazon's basket just because of how you do business with us versus them. And that is something that the minor cloud providers, so 2 through 4, are focused on and trying actively to remediate.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to move to a quick slide just as a reminder that there are cost reduction opportunities in the cloud that we've been talking about for the past hour. And, they go across technology, training, labor, but there are rewards that go beyond simply cutting costs. It's important to be able to talk about CapEx reduction, whether that comes from real estate servers, whatever, as well as the potential for revenue and product creation. And, just something to keep in mind, because you have to have your business mind as well as your technical mind as you are being a cloud steward. But with that, let's move on to, with a couple minutes left, let's talk about, let's see if there are any additional questions, as well as just a reminder of where we can find Spot by NetApp next.
Yeah, so this is a good time to mention that the FinOps X convention is going to be in San Diego, June 27th through 30th. We are a premier partner of the FinOps Foundation. We work closely with them to make sure that our product portfolio is aligning with the best practices in FinOps. We're gold sponsors. You can find us at booth G10, and we'll have live demos. We'll have product experts and more. So please, if you're going to be at FinOps X, or if this is something that interests you, please come swing by, say hi, get some swag, learn a little bit more about how the Spot by NetApp portfolio will enable your team for FinOps success in all aspects of cloud governance, right? From security to API management, to virtual machine and infrastructure management, to containers, right? Containers and Kubernetes are becoming more and more of a thing. And Spot by NetApp has some tools that wrap around the best practices for the FinOps Foundation guidelines on how to secure and optimize from a FinOps perspective, your containerized workloads.
All right.
I'm not seeing any additional questions come in on top of the ones that we asked, and we've kind of seemed to hit on everything. So I just want to say thank you, Hyon, for you and kind of leading this and your insights. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Again, we've recorded this session, so it's going to be available on our website. You'll get an email with a link to it. And if you have questions, please send them back to us. We'd love to answer them. We'd love to talk more with you about your cloud ops journey and how you're approaching FinOps governance and securing your cloud workloads.
Yes, we realize we've just touched the tip of the iceberg here. There's so much, so many other problems, so many other challenges, and frankly, we're hoping to help you as you go through this journey of figuring out how to clean up this mess that we've made over the past few years.
All right. And with that, we'll close out the webinar. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. We appreciate you giving your feedback, and we'll look forward to talking with you and Hyon Park from Amalgam
Insights.
Amalgam Insights at a future presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Take care.